All right, my friends, let's get into it here. If you have your Bibles, I believe we are in Genesis 24. Just a second here, I'm going to join the Zoom call with my iPad, so I've got backup here just in case things go wrong on the owl here. Let's do that. All right, Genesis 24. Just to catch everyone up on where we're at, we are still in the story of Abraham and Sarah. It kind of dominates the Genesis narrative in its own way, but it's a foundational story. Sarah, unfortunately, is no longer with us. She has passed on. And as the narrative would have it, their son, Isaac, has not taken a wife as of yet. So unfortunately, she does not get to see her son's wedding. First time that's dawned on me. But Abraham, in his wisdom, has sent out for a woman for his son to marry from his village of origin. And so he sent a servant up to, at least as my understanding of the geography would have it, up to where Abraham came from to find a suitable wife. The servant, it's an interesting place. It's maybe a place in which we see a servant in their own prayer basically says, Lord, let the woman who speaks to me at this well be the proper bride for this young man. And we have Rebecca come into the scene and offer this man a drink, some hospitality, which shows something of the character of the kind of woman that Abraham would want in his son's home. So let's see where we are at here. I think we're at the story. Rebecca's here. Water for the camels.
You're up to 22.
We're up to 22. So Rebecca has met the servant. Actually, let's go from 18. And let's see here. Whose voice have we not heard? Shelley, if you would be so kind as to read from 18, let's get a good portion done to the end of 39. That would be a blessing.
Okay. End of 39. Okay. 24:18. Drink, my lord, Rebecca said, and quickly lowered her jar upon her hand and gave him a drink. When she had finished giving him a drink, she said, I will draw for your camels also until they have finished drinking. So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran again to the well to draw, and she drew for all his camels. The man gazed at her in silence to learn whether or not the Lord had made his journey successful. When the camels had finished drinking, the man took a gold nose ring weighing a half shekel and 2 bracelets for her arms weighing 10 gold shekels and said, tell me whose daughter you are. Is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night? She said to him, I am the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor. She said, we have plenty of straw and fodder and a place to spend the night. The man bowed his head and worshiped the Lord and said, blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his steadfast love and his faithfulness toward my master. Ask for me, the Lord has led me on the way to the house of my master's kin. Then the girl ran and told her mother's household about these things. Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban, and Laban ran out to the man to the spring. As soon as he had seen the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's arms, and when he heard the words of his sister Rebekah, thus the man spoke to me. He went to the man, and there he was, standing by the camels at the spring. He said, come in, O blessed of the Lord. Why do you stand outside when I have prepared the house and a place for the camels? So the man came into the house, and Laban loaded the camels and gave him straw and fodder for the camels, and water to wash his feet and the feet of the men who were with him. Then the food was set before him to eat, but he said, I will not eat until I have told my errand. He said, speak on. So he said, I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has greatly blessed my master, and he has become wealthy. He has given him flocks and herds, silver and gold, male and female slaves, camels and donkeys. And Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master when she was old, and he has given him all that he has. My master made me swear, saying, you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites in whose land I live, but you shall go to my father's house, to my kindred, and get a wife for my son. I said to my master, perhaps the woman will not follow me.
It's a good place as any to take a break here. Couple of great things I noticed about Rebecca, her character. Not only is her hospitality extended toward the gentleman, but also all of the people within his party. She goes out of her way to make sure also that his animals and livestock are taken care of. And moreover, she's got some level of knowledge of the workings of the house that she lives in, which gives me hope. I've got children who don't know that dishes need to be washed and things need to be done. And it's my desire that they can know how the house operates. And she definitely has that insight. And that's all of those things I think are here in the text to give us knowledge of her character. So anything else anyone notice?
Well, yes, Rebecca, I mean, it's trying to understand the context and the time period. Is it normal for somebody to give another person a nose ring and bracelets? I mean, what must that have felt like, and what was the experience? And did Rebecca have any understanding of what was actually happening? And I love the way kind of like a forbearance or a foretelling. When the servant, we don't know if the servant's, I guess he's a Jew, but it's unclear that he believes that God is his God, because he always says, my master's God.
Yeah.
And that God spoke with him. So in my brain, I kind of took that to mean that there is this opening for other than just the Jews to have this special relationship with God. But it was unclear.
Earlier, it said that everyone within Abraham's household was circumcised. So at some point, he was a part of that of that experience. That does not necessarily speak to what he believes. And so, yeah, there's an interesting thing here. Though I will say, the text is clear that this servant, it says that he speaks to the Lord, or he prays, if you will. O Lord, God of my master. So he's got some level of relationship there, or at least acknowledgement that God is real.
But he didn't say my God. He
Yeah.
said the God of my master. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
I think you make a good point, though. Abraham insisted on a marriage within his kinship group, and sent this person to bring a bride back who was related genetically, as opposed to from the general public available there. And the gifts are, it's not a bride price, because it doesn't go to the family, it goes to the bride herself. So I guess it's some kind of, maybe a sign that there's wealth as an attraction for her to this marriage, or just a warm welcoming, maybe an innocent gift, but maybe also one that implies that there's the person that is courting her is wealthy, and that this is something she would go to and might be worth leaving.
And I have a feeling she knows what time it is, because of Laban's reaction. He goes right on out, sees what's going on, and well, hey, welcome, kind of deal. Like, you guys seem to have some bread, and my sister might leave. That all sounds good to me, kind of attitude. So yeah. Let's read on from 40. I'll take a turn here. And I'll try and get deeper into the chapter. It's a long chapter. So one will not follow me. This is the servant speaking of the Lord. But he said to me, of Abraham, but he said to me, the Lord before whom I walk will send his angel with you and make your way successful. You shall get a wife for my son, from my kindred, and from my father's house. Then you will be free from my oath when you come to my kindred. Even if they will not give her to you, you will be free from my oath. I came today to the spring and said, O Lord, God of my master Abraham, if now you will only make successful the way I am going. I am standing here by the spring of water. Let the young woman who comes out to draw, to whom I shall say, please give me a little water from your jar to drink, and who will say to me, drink, and I will draw for your camels also. Let her be the woman whom the Lord has appointed for my master's son. Before I had finished speaking in my heart, there was Rebekah coming out with her water jar on her shoulder. And she went down to the spring and drew. I said to her, please let me drink. She quickly let down her jar from her shoulder and said, drink, and I will also water your camels. So I drank, and she also watered the camels. Then I asked her, whose daughter are you? She said, the daughter of Bethel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore to him. So I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her arm. Then I bowed my head and worshiped the Lord and blessed the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who led me by the right way to obtain the daughter of my master's kinsman for his son. Now then, if you will deal loyally and truly with my master, tell me, if not, tell me so, that I may turn either to the right hand or to the left. Let's stop there for a second. So yeah, there's something to this servant. Clearly, this is the genie getting his way out, if you will. The text reads that he's free from his debt of service to Abraham's house upon completing this mission. And so he seems in some regards anxious to do so. And there may be something else there for that God of my masters then. And if we're doing this from a hermeneutic framework, right, of saying, okay, the main goal of this text is to call the Hebrew people to be set apart and to show that they have a special relationship with God. Well, here is a great example of someone who may be an interloper, if you will, to the faith or to the tradition, not being fully accepted, if you will, or at least that I can read that as being in the text to show that this, though he was in Abraham's house, he is not a part of the promise. So
another thing I want to add is, even though the angel accompanies him, remember he says the angel is going to help me, there's still a choice that's being made here. And that's what I think is powerful at this last bit. He says whether you choose or not. So there's a sense of agency there on the part of Rebekah, and well, at least on the part of her family, as to whether or not they're going to move in that direction.
that's right. That's right. For Abraham, this was a faith thing, right? I believe that despite whatever bad blood that made me leave my father's home and the tradition there or whatever, that my family will re-ally with me, because that's what marriage, in that day in particular, really was. Though I must say it still is to this day. I'm doing quite a lot of running around for my mother-in-law right now. Still, right? But so he's believing in faith that he's going to tell the truth about who this servant is, and there perhaps his kindred will be willing to send some of their first fruits out to the land of Canaan to realign with Abraham. There's a lot there. A lot there.
Alvin, I got a question. Do you know if if this was originally an oral tradition that was later written down, because there's a lot of repetition in this, like you would get in an oral story. Yeah.
Certainly, yeah, and I believe if even tradition holds that Genesis and really all the first books of Torah, which are attributed to Moses in particular, are just a part of the oral tradition that's been handed down. You put Moses's imprimatur on it to make it unimpeachable, and also one of the things I was thinking about just the other day about that, by putting Moses's name on it or stamp on it, it's also coming from on high. It's coming from the elite, right? That he was a man of letters. It's a way of just kind of noting that, this learned man of letters is put forward a compendium of all of these stories for us to, of how we became a people and how our faith began. But yeah, I think it definitely came from the oral tradition, and you've got that rabbinic repetition thing going here.
And also, I read this book by Rachel Held Evans, where she has a whole chapter on origin stories. And she talks a lot about the fact that we all have our origin story, in our own families. We have little stories about why so-and-so was named such and such. And, these little patterns that we have, and we grow up with them, and we repeat them to our own children. In a way, that's what this is, right? They're stories that are told over and over and over again, and then finally written down.
There is a very beautiful part of this. I want to compare Rebecca to Mary. When Mary was visited by the angel, her sweet, and she was already a godly woman, acceptance of what she was told by the angel. And here we have Rebecca, who, somebody shows up and says, I'm going to marry you to somebody you've never heard of. She probably had. They were aware of Abraham and the family, but still, she was a young woman. I was blown away, and this seems minor, but I think it's important. 10 camels traveling a long distance, a young girl carrying water in a jug to all 10 camels, plus the servant. It doesn't say anything about the servants, the men who came with him. And I'm reminded, to those of you who've been to the Middle East and to Israel, so many of the wells were not, you go to the little well with a stone wall around it, a nice little bucket, and you roll it down and you pull it up again. Many of them, you went downstairs to the point under the ground level, where the water actually was there in the water table and deep enough to be drawn up. And it said she ran to do this. I have, my personal thought is that Rebecca saw the Lord in all of this. She immediately, generously and exhaustingly, I would assume, made the servant feel welcome. And this is obviously before the gift of the gold earrings and the nose ring. So she was taking him at his word, but I think more importantly, she felt the hand of the divine in the whole situation.
Right. Preach, Bill. Preach. And I got to tell you, like hospitality, I've bantered about wanting to do a book about hospitality and biblical hospitality, and this is a beautiful example, without any promise up front of anything, other than the reward of knowing that you cared for someone who God has put in your path. She gets to it and hops to it, and it was probably painstaking work. You're right, Bill, to go back and forth and water all those camels and give all that effort. And in its own way, it is an interesting thing there. And I'm not going to sidetrack us with it. We read last week the story of Jesus encountering the woman at the well. And again, it's another example of someone, who has gone out of their way in the presence of the Lord, and is rewarded for it. This is a person of within the faith tradition the woman at the well was of unnoble origin and definitely did not have the best and most holy of lifestyles, and yet, you know, she was blessed with immortality, if you will, by the fact that we're still talking about her to this day. And we're still talking about, you know, the encounter she had with Christ. So yeah, you're right. That'll preach, Phil. That'll preach for sure. Let's see here. We are reading on from 50. I think we can get to from 50 to the end of the chapter. Al, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay. Starting at 15.
Mhm.
Then Laban and Bethuel answered, "The thing comes from the Lord. We cannot speak to you anything bad or good. Look, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go, and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken." When Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed himself to the ground before the Lord. And the servant brought out jewelry of silver and gold and garments, and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave to her brother and to her mother costly ornaments. Then he and the men who were with him ate and drank, and they spent the night there. When they rose in the morning, he said, "Send me back to my master." Her brother and her mother said, "Let the young woman remain with us a while, at least 10 days. After that, she may go." But he said to them, "Do not delay me, since the Lord has made my journey successful. Let me go that I may go to my master." They said, "We will call the young woman and ask her." And they called Rebekah and said to her, "Will you go with this man?" She said, "I will." So they sent her away, their sister Rebekah and her nurse, along with Abraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, "May you, our sister, become thousands of myriads. May your offspring gain possession of the gates of their foes." Then Rebekah and her maids rose up, mounted the camels, and followed the man, and the servant took Rebekah and went his way. Now Isaac had come from Lahai-Rah. Oh, that's a tough one. And was settled in the Negev. Isaac went out in the evening to walk in the field, and looking up, he saw camels coming. Rebekah looked up, and when she saw Isaac, she slipped quickly from the camel and said to the servant, "Who is the man over there walking in the field to meet us?" The servant said, "It is my master." So she took her veil and covered herself. And the servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent. He took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Not quite sure the purpose of the attempt to delay the departure of Rebekah, whether that was purely because they wanted, knowing that she was probably gone and not to return, they just wanted some more time with her, or whether they had some other thoughts.
Trying to remember, and I think it may be a bit of an apocryphal story, but wasn't there some, at some point, wasn't there some sort of back and forth about this marriage?
That goes in the next chapter, I think.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what I was thinking.
exactly, yeah. So I think we're gonna get,
We're gonna get.
yeah, we're gonna get there.
Right. And once again, the
Stay tuned.
gift issue comes up, that this time it is a bride price, because he has gifts to the family as opposed to well.
Just a brief note, this next chapter, we're going to Genesis 25. Abraham remarries, which is the first time I've actually considered that, and that's a shame because my wife has a cousin named Keturah, and I know it's a biblical name, but I did not know. It's fun to do this, because though I've read this many, many times, I did EFM last year, I read this just quickly, just breezed by it, didn't even stop to notice these important details.
So isn't he like around 100 at this point?
Yeah.
That's 100
Yeah.
also, right?
Some men can't hold
I
that
mean,
woman.
some men, that's the way they go, man. I mean, there's a famous singer from the group the Isley Brothers. I won't name which one, but I was in a mall once in Los Angeles, and I saw him walking along, and I was like, "Oh, isn't that beautiful?" He's out with like maybe his granddaughter, I think, and then they were way more intimate than a granddaughter situation. I'm like, this man is 80 years old. That woman is young for me, and I'm in my 20s. Like, what is this? Like, some men, that's how they get down. Yeah.
Who's the judge, right?
It's as old as time, apparently.
All the more power to it.
There you go. So let's see here. Let's read about Abraham here. So Genesis 25, verse 1. Abraham took another wife, whose name was Keturah. She bore him Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, Suah. Jokshan was the father of Sheba and Dedan. The sons of Dedan were Ashuram, Letshim, Newman. The sons of Midian were Epham, Epher, Hanok, Abidah, and Eldah. All these were the children of Keturah. Abraham gave all he had to Isaac, but the sons of his concubines, Abraham gave gifts while he was still living, and he sent them away from his son Isaac eastward to the east country. So clearly this is there to give an origin story to the neighboring tribes and peoples. And one of the things that I always point to with these things these are your cousins.
Not created equal.
No.
They're half brothers.
Yeah. These are your half brothers, these are your cousins, these are your family.
But they don't get any of the inheritance.
They don't get all of the inheritance with.
Maybe a Christmas present, but no inheritance.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Abraham, the father Abraham certainly had many sons, as we see here.
That's right.
But there's the good ones and there's the not so good ones.
Yeah.
Well, it says sent them away from his son.
Yeah.
You know, that's interesting language, right?
Yeah. All right, we should read on here. Yeah, that'd be wonderful. Let's.
So chapter 25, verse 7.
Yeah.
This is the length of Abraham's life, 175 years. Abraham breathed his last and died in a good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered to his people. His sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah, in the field of Ephron, son of Zohar, the Hittite, east of Mamre, the field that Abraham purchased from the Hittites. There Abraham was buried with his wife Sarah. After the death of Abraham, God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac settled at Beer Lahai Roi. These are the descendants of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's slave girl, bore to Abraham. These are the names of the sons of Ishmael, named in the order of their birth. Oh boy. Nebaioth, the firstborn of Ishmael, and Kedar, Abdiel, Midsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadad, Tima, Jetor, Nafshish, and Kedemah. These are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their names by their villages and by their encampments, 12 princes according to the tribes. This is the length of the life of Ishmael, 137 years. He breathed his last and died, and was gathered to his people. They settled from Havilah to Shur, which is opposite Egypt in the direction of Syria. He settled down alongside of all his people. These are the descendants of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Padar Aram, sister of Laban the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren. And the Lord granted his prayer, and his wife Rebekah conceived. The children struggled together within her, and she said, "If it is to be this way, why do I live?" So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, the elder shall serve the younger." Should we continue to the end, or?
Let's
Maybe stop?
get to the end of the story,
Okay.
this part of the story,
When her,
before Esau sells out.
okay. When her time to give birth was at hand, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red, all his body like a hairy mantle. So they named him Esau. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand gripping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man, living in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he was fond of game, but Rebekah loved Jacob.
The name Jacob means he supplants, or he grabs by the heel. So, he's a trickster.
Mm.
And a wheeler dealer. He's in the tents, which is, kind of a polite way of saying he hangs out with the ladies. That's his bailiwick, more of his bailiwick. He's not, you've got this duality there. You've got one brother who's out there doing the rough, tumble, manly things.
And he's even hairy.
Yeah, he's hairy, he's burly, he's out doing the work, right? Dad loves that. And you've got the other one, hanging out in the tents cooking dinner. And
The quiet bookish son.
yeah, the quiet bookish son. Yep. And so the table has been set for a little bit of a back and forth here.
I'm interested in the women have been barren for a long period of time, Sarah and now Rebecca, and then Rachel, and then as we go forward. And that in each case, they were visited by the Lord and told that they were going to have someone who was to be a great leader and to be a progenitor of large numbers of people. So there's something about women in each of these characters that, they are not held in respect when they can't provide, when they're infertile, that's considered to make them less useful.
Yeah.
But they're rewarded somehow in the end by having a child that's more important than the normal child.
It can also be read that God values giving comfort to people around that area of their life. I know when my wife and I first started planning on a family, we did not plan for what we got. We were in a situation where my wife both times had very severe preeclampsia. And so that informs us going forward, right? And I would imagine the only way that we're going to have another child is if an angel of the Lord comes to Cherston and makes very clear that she will be safe and that child will be great. Those are the terms, right? So I feel like there's something there, for me at least, that speaks to a thing that's roiling within our culture right now, that it is a part of the nature of God to make sure that people are comfortable, that they will be safe, and that their pregnancies will be successful. And that's my modern take on this.
So you're praying for this?
No more. No.
No,
No, the thing is, my daughter has definitely healed us of any. We thought, I tell you guys, we thought we were phenomenal parents. My son Miles is just the most polite, lovely little guy that you will ever meet. Many of you know, right? And so we just thought we were spectacular parents, and we launched into having a second because we've got this down. We know exactly what to do, and my daughter has confounded all of our best laid plans, and will likely continue to do so for the rest of our days. And
Family role.
yeah, and you know what? That's okay. I'm actually happy to have been humbled because she's also a leader. I'm excited to see where it's going. Speaking of where it's going, we should. I think we can take a moment and get through a little bit of the Isaac story. I don't know if you guys, have the time, but if we can take another 15 minutes and maybe read on, that would be lovely. So who would like to read? Kelly, would you? Do you mind reading on? Let's read 29 to the end of the chapter and then take a moment and talk about that. And then we'll pick up again from verse 1 of 26 in just a moment.
Once when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the field and he was famished. Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stuff, for I am famished." Therefore he was called Edom. Jacob said, "First, sell me your birthright." Esau said, "I am about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright.
This story is kind of wild to me, and it always has been. First of all, it must have been some killer lentil stew. but like who goes like, hey,
Not very loving brothers.
Exactly.
I mean, that's for sure.
definitely, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Dying of hunger, and I'll only feed you if you give me your very best possession.
Yeah. But I mean, it's almost right out of like it's almost like television writing. It's overly dramatic, right? He comes in like, give me some of that red stuff. Like he's such a disguised guy, right? Like he doesn't even like know what he's eating. And he's willing to trade his birthright in for it, which is just wild. But we see in this Jacob being let's be generous, being crafty, figuring out a way to line it up. As I see it though, as the story tells it, they're the only two who knows what happened in that tent. And Esau had no reason to keep that contract, but likely kept it nonetheless. I'm sure there was drama about it as we read on. But yeah, Mary.
I'm sorry, you want me to read?
No, you were thinking about something.
It seems to me that I'm questioning why one child is more important than another in a family. Why is the firstborn given excessive privilege that the secondborn is not to share of? So a secondborn might see the injustice in that and realize that they couldn't do anything about it, so only by trickery arranges to transfer it to themselves. Not so very attractive. But why is it custom? Why are there so many things in the Old Testament that I think are quite different in the New Testament about how each person is of the same worth in the eyes of the Lord? Here you've got to be in a family line, and it's even better. You certainly can't be a woman except to produce babies by and large, and you're supposed to be the first son, not the second son.
I have a bit of a theory on this story. I believe that at a certain level, this myth here undersells what actually took place in this situation. Earlier in the chapter, it makes clear that Rebecca prefers Jacob. And it's also clear that Rebecca keeps Jacob close. We always tend to, within the history of humanity, look at female power as being either something to be dismissed or the work of witchcraft, right? Like it's those witches next door. It's not that those women were wealthy and they went out of their way to make sure Cinderella got to the ball, right? It's that they were actually witches and they used magic to make these things happen. I think that this is really at some level a story of you know, it's me reading into it and looking at it with modern eyes, and I've got to step back and realize that, you know, like we spoke of earlier in our class, you know, there's always the Humpty Dumpty problem. You know, the story says nothing about an egg, but in our mind, we know of an egg because we've added that to the tradition later. That came once there were illustrations of this old, you know, nursery rhyme. But I think that looking back at something like this with modern eyes, I think scripture is pretty illustrative that there was a difference in the way that Isaac wanted this to go and Rebecca wanted it to go, and it wound up going Rebecca's way.
Why does Esau say, look, I'm about to die?
Yeah,
Why?
it seems overly dramatic, right? Like this seems like something.
He's hungry.
Yeah, he's that hungry.
He's a man's man.
Yeah. I mean,
I would die for that stew.
So I'm reminded of what you said last week about Abraham and how crafty and wily he was and how he was able to take possession of certain geographic regions, not by the sword, but by his wit. And I think this is an echo of what we saw with Abraham. Here's the son, even though he's not the favored son of Abraham, but he's using his wiles to get his way. And I think just as I've been saying, this kind of overly dramatic, I'm going to die. I think it makes for good storytelling and oral tradition to have these things that kind of get solidified. And I do think that there is this behind the scenes, the power of women, I don't, you know, is revealed. I agree with what you said there on that.
I think if you were making this a TV show,
exactly.
you would have a conspiracy going on between Rebecca and
Right.
Jacob to get rid of Esau. And
But he could have poisoned the stew and then.
murder's a little bit crass, you know.
Good TV show. Bill,
Interesting message from this for our culture, our world culture today. We saw a man come in and want immediate gratification. He didn't think about the implications of what he was doing. He may have been really dumb. He may have been just a jerky teenage boy or whatever. But if you apply that to today, we have a culture that wants everything now. We don't think about the future. And we get often our comeuppance when the results happen. We all wanted out of Afghanistan, and I'm not getting into politics, but everybody wanted to get us out of Afghanistan, a 20-year ongoing war. And so out we came. And look at the fiasco that came from that. As a culture, you've come a long way, baby. You deserve a break today. All the rest of the advertising promises immediate gratification. And where does that lead us? Is it like Esau?
You know, it says here, Esau despised his birthright. I must tell you guys, you know, in the midst of some of the craziness that was roiling over these last few years, you know, there began to be a little chatter among my family, like, where would we go if we have to go? And the elders in my family, my uncles who are getting up there, were very clear, we're not going anywhere. You never trade in your birthright. We live here, this is our country too, and we're standing on that. And they went right back to this, you know, at a certain level, Esau's the kind of person, like you said, Bill, who makes immediate decisions. He wasn't the right one to be Don, right? Like this fell to Michael Corleone because Michael was much more thoughtful than Sonny, and Esau was definitely Sonny.
Godfather.
Okay.
Yeah, a little Godfather reference, I'm sorry. Yes, Rosemary.
I was just thinking, reading this, this is kind of the basis of English law. The firstborn son, you know, because during much of English law, the poor kid that was the second born, you know, had to go out and do whatever he had to do, and the firstborn became the duke or the, you know, or whatever. And the poor women, for most of that period, you know, were marched around, particularly royal women, you know, and sent from place to place for marriage, for, you know, so that there would be treaties. That's what the, you know, the young women were good for. But also there used to be a doctrine, I don't know how long it lasted, called prima nocta. Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard the term, but I have no idea what it means.
No, it was the rule that a lord in a land had the right to take for himself the first night of a married couple before the husband. And that was pretty standard during most of what we call the knights in armor and that sort of thing.
Which is absolutely wild. Absolutely absurd. I think this is a good place to take a stop. Next week we'll come back. There'll be more of Isaac's story. I think we're pretty much on track to get to the place where when Deutsch comes back, we'll be able to wrap up with him. Hopefully, fingers crossed. But it's absolutely a joy, and we should pray and get about our day. Lord, your scripture says that in all our getting, we are to get understanding. We're blessed to come together with one another and gain a little more understanding of you and our community in the presence of your word and your people. I pray that you continue to bless us, to be a blessing to our community around us, particularly Epiphany, and that as we learn more about you and grow in you, that we will grow with one another as your word promises. In Jesus' name.